runners. So what does that mean? In the field of sports sciences, much research is done with the aim of gaining a greater understanding of human performance and the trends in it in order to ultimately optimize that performance. Two phenomena that are closely interconnected and can enable us to better understand this are sex-based performance differences and performance trajectories. For the purpose of my research, I define sex-based performances as disparity in one's ability to perform solely as a result of sex, and that is quantified as a percent difference, so you'll hear me reference it as a percent difference. And I define performance trajectories as like progression and trends in one's ability to perform over time. And that I do directly quantify, but it's more like qualitative to a great extent. And so both of these have deep underlying physical connections. So what is currently known about these two ideas, and what are the gaps in understanding? Current literature focuses on these two phenomena in two distinct populations, an elite adolescent population and a professional, typically adult population. The younger population consists of top junior athletes, those that are highly ranked in their age groups on a national or world stage, and the professional group is essentially the best of the best, those that are highly competitive on this national or world stage. So in the adolescent population, there's a lot of variability seen in sex-based performance differences. Prior to puberty, Atkinson et al. And Harnish and Swenson quantify gaps ranging from 2 to 5%, with more significant divergence emerging at and after puberty, namely about 10 to 12%. This is largely explained by physiological shifts, namely David Handelsman's 2017 study, which identifies almost identical timing actually between divergence in testosterone concentrations between genders and this divergence in performance. Performance trajectories are closely tied to these sex-based performance differences, as they are both largely a result of these hormonal shifts that I just mentioned. The adolescent age range, as defined by Harnish and Swenson, is largely characterized by rapid improvement, but they do note that while both genders grow and develop rapidly, males tend to develop in ways that are more conducive to sports performance and thus progress more rapidly in their sport. So this might be in terms of like literal physical development, such as muscle mass, as highlighted by that research of Harnish and Swenson, as well as continued divergence in these testosterone concentrations, as highlighted by the research of Seenfield et al. Professional sex-based performance differences in this professional cohort are well agreed upon and relatively stable. Ospina, Bettencourt et al. Quantify the gap in elite distance running as ranging from 11.5 to 12.8%. And so you can kind of see in this graphic, it's actually graphed as a function of like rank or like performance ability, but you can even see across all of these, even as there's like kind of fluctuation in it, it's just this constant stable gap. In this population, performance trajectories are typically characterized by a trend of improvement towards peak performance, followed by maintenance of peak performance for a number of years. Hagen et al.'s 2018 study proves to be crucial for understanding trends in this cohort. They identify a mean peak age in world-class track and field athletes of around 25 to 27, but they do note that female distance runners tended to reach a higher peak age. And they also found that obviously there was improvement in the years prior to peak age, but the female population they studied showed greater rates of improvement. So here you can see kind of those performance trajectories like in action. You can see this improvement towards and then maintenance of this peak performance. And the reason that it looks like it's declining is because it's convention in the field to graph it as progression of like a function of the world record. So like they're progressing towards this world record, and that's why this axis is never actually reached. So here you can see that most research focuses on these two previously defined cohorts while sort of skipping over, or at the very least, broadly generalizing this middle age range, which I identify as being from about ages 19 to 24. So for the purpose of my research, the group I chose to focus on is collegiate student athletes, which actually proves to line up almost exactly with the age range I identified, again, that 19 to 24. And so studying this group actually does lend itself to additional considerations. They prove to be a unique population in a unique situation, facing unique situational pressures, like balancing a full collegiate education as well as up to 3 seasons of sports competitions and performances. These pressures, when compounded with other factors, can end up manifesting in mental and physical illnesses, many of which can have an impact on performance. So low energy availability, low carbohydrate availability, relative energy deficiency in sports, and eating disorders are all phenomena that can emerge as a result of this stress and pressure. And while the specifics of each of those things aren't super relevant to my research, so I'm not going to explicitly define them, it is important to note that they all may be associated with or lead to improper fueling and recovery practices and can have an impact on performance and or lead to injury. All of these are extremely prevalent in this population as identified by Bierman et al., Carson et al., and Krebs et al. Respectively. So this just kind of adds another branch of consideration to my gap and to my research, and further exemplifies why this is such a valuable group to study. So all this together yields my research question. How do sex differences in the performance and performance patterns of American collegiate distance runners compare to those of adolescent and professional athletes? That is there a difference in sex-based performance differences and performance trajectories in this age cohort? And if so, what is it? So research on both sex-based performance differences and performance trajectories is highly statistical and largely uses the same data. So thus I was able to use the same data set for both with little to no modifications. All of this data was taken directly from track and field results, as there's little, as opposed to cross-country, there's little to no variability across races and across seasons, so it's really easy to compare across those, and also across athletes. Data was taken for each athlete for each season from 2016 indoor to 2019 outdoor, and I chose this slightly older age range to avoid any complications that may have emerged as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. I took data from 5K races, as it's an event available both indoor and outdoor, but when 5K data wasn't available for an athlete for a season, I took data from a comparable distance event, so that would be the 3,000 in indoor and the 10,000 in outdoor. I took all data from TFRRS, or Track and Field Results Reporting System, or as I recently learned from a college student athlete friend, TFRS, as it's the most accessible and widely reaching database that was available to me. So from there, I identified athletes by their performance or their participation in an elite level competition, such as a national or conference championship, and from there I was able to access their profile and get data for all the seasons I just mentioned. For modeling performance trajectories, I largely based my methods off that of Weipert et al., who study performance progression in an elite cohort of German distance runners. This consists of normalizing the data points to existing records. In my case, I used NCAA records, and then graphing them as a function of time or season. In my case, I graphed them as a function of season. My methods differed from theirs slightly due to software availability. So instead of using second-degree polynomial modeling, I ran both a linear regression and then an attempt to kind of emulate that quadratic modeling, linearize the data by taking the square root of my y values, and ran another linear regression. So you can see an example of one of my models here. I did this for each 100 athletes, yielding 200 models. And from there, I took the equations, some screenshots of the graphs, p-values, and r-squared values for analysis. For modeling sex-based performance differences, I based my methods off the studies of Atkinson et al. And Ospina-Bettencourt et al., and many others who quantify it using a percent difference. They and I, in turn, use the formula male performance minus female performance divided by male performance times 100, which again yields that percent difference. In order to have a manageable number of data points, but still kind of represent the broad spectrum of athletes I included, I divided the data into quartiles and also calculated the difference for that each quartile, as well as the maximum and minimum values. So here you can see an example of two of my models for performance trajectories compared to the study I based them off of. It's not a great fit, and that's kind of the trend for my results. Out of 100 athletes analyzed, only 18 showed a statistically significant trend in their raw data, and in the linearized data, only 19 showed a statistically significant trend. So while many of my trajectories don't really follow clear trends, from examination of the scatter plots and the slopes of the lines of best fit and such, I can still make some inferences, most significantly when an athlete actually experienced performance decline as opposed to the anticipated improvement. So you can see here, while it really doesn't follow a clear trend, you can see that there is a trend of decline as they're, again, trending away from that record, getting worse. So this was actually a lot more prevalent in women, with 19 out of 50 experiencing decline compared to just 4 out of 50 men. So here you can see my results for sex-based performance differences. The minimum calculated value, or the maximum observed disparity, was 26.9%, while the maximum was the minimum was 11.6%. The absolute mean of my data set was 17.2%. Additionally, there proved to be a higher calculated disparity in my lower performing cohort, denoted by max because they're the biggest times, and kind of like an almost inverse trend there. So what does this mean? While many of my results are not what I hoped for, statistically speaking, I can still draw some conclusions. Most significantly, there's extreme variability in performance in this cohort, such that few modelable trends do present themselves. This may, to an extent, be a result of the issues I discussed, as highlighted by Bierman et al., Carson et al., and Krebs et al., which, such as increased injury risk, disordered eating, and low energy availability, which are extremely prevalent and, again, may impair performance in this population. They also identified those factors to be more prevalent in the female population, For example, Krebs et al. Identify rates of 46% of disordered eating in an elite population of female collegiate distance runners compared to 14% in males, which may be a reason for much higher rates of decline in my female population. So this, yeah. Finally, both the raw data and the linearized data proved to be about equally good, or in my case, equally bad fits, suggesting like this extreme variability that I've been mentioning and just like an innate lack of trends in my data. This proves actually to be contradictory to what current literature would suggest, and to be honest, what I expected going into this project. In a very similar age cohort, albeit in Germany, a completely different setting, Weipert et al. Found clear, concrete trends that again follow that second-degree polynomial modeling that you saw earlier, showing this undisputed improvement. And the research of Atkinson et al. And Hagen et al. Further qualifies their findings, also anticipating in this improvement in this cohort, in fact, more so in women to an extent. But as I mentioned, I found much higher rates of like variability and decline than improvement, and that decline was more prevalent in women. With regards to sex-based performance differences, the values I calculated using that quartile data that I mentioned all proved to be significantly higher, ranging from about 12% to about 27% than what is currently accepted in abutting age cohorts of a very similar ability level. Like, it doesn't make sense for it to be like that. Ospina, Bettencourt et al., as I mentioned, quantify the gap in elite distance running as ranging from 11.5 to 12.8%, and Harnish and Swenson identify an average gap in an elite adolescent population as about 12.3%. So this is a notable finding, and it is really undermined by limitations that I'm about to discuss, but it does illustrate a need for, like a severe need for further study into this cohort, because my results do prove to be so drastically different than I anticipated. So by far, my biggest limitation was the lack of access to a confirmed complete data set. As I mentioned, I use the online database Track and Field Results Reporting System, or TFRS, and while it is the best readily available place for me to gather such data, if it was actually complete for every athlete I analyzed, and I think it's a possibility that it was incomplete. And so this may have skewed my results both due to potential of omission of a data point and or inclusion of a data point that wasn't actually an athlete's season best, which could have resulted in the extreme variability I saw. It also hurts confidence in conclusions I'm able to draw from my research, as I don't know if it's actually a function of stuff that's actually happening or if it's a function of having a potentially incomplete data set. It's also possible that my means of data collection actually underrepresented female performance, which may have been a reason for the sex-based performance difference values I calculated to be so much higher than anticipated. Because I only included athletes who had more than 5 results, I often had to, just for the purpose of having an effective model, I often had to omit athletes and include the next best option, who was typically lower performing. Noticeably more female athletes were omitted than male athletes, again, likely as a result of greater performance impairing and inhibiting factors in a female population. So this just may have exacerbated my calculated gap. Finally, my means of data collection proved to be providing diminishing marginal returns. Initially, I hoped to have a large number of statistically significant models and be able to compare stuff like the slope of the line of best fit and maximums and minimums in order to draw like real conclusions about the nature of performance trajectories in this population. But as I mentioned, I didn't have that, and that really rendered my initial plan pretty null. I concluded it wouldn't really be worth like an insane time investment to yield only a few more statistically significant models. So I really had to change gears and focus on a broader analysis of trends and lack thereof, and the results you see today. So a lot of my data proves to be really inconclusive. It begins to lay a foundation for critical research in a severely understudied population. Future research could follow similar methods, but should focus on trying to find clear performance trajectories or confirm the lack of clear performance trajectories I found, as well as either confirm or reject the values I found for sex-based performance differences. And they could do this by using a data set that is, again, confirmed to be complete. The way I see it, there are 2 ways this could be done, either really directly by following, monitoring, and measuring a population for 4 years, which could also yield insight as to the result of any trends or unique trends or variability seen, or it could be done more indirectly by just acquiring a data set that is confirmed to be complete from an individual or an organization that you know would have that someone knows would have that. So there's still so much more research to be done in studying this population, and it's critical to develop a more complete picture of complex trends in performance and physiology in order to build systems and institutions to better serve it. Thank you. My sources are available upon request. That's my email. It's the same as everyone's, kind of. Questions? Yeah, Donnelly.
Of athletes before paring it down to only those with complete results?
You mean like, why did I choose this population, or how did I like get my data?
How did you select the population that you pulled from? Like,
Okay, yeah. So basically, that was like kind of the hardest part of my research. But ultimately, I went on this website and I filtered by competitions by years. So like 2016, I looked for athletes that were freshmen at high-level competitions. 2017, I looked for athletes that were sophomores at high-level competitions. 2018, I looked for athletes that were, yeah, and so on. And there was a lot of overlap, so it was kind of a tedious process. But like from there, when an athlete had more than 5 data points, I chose to include them in my analysis, which surprisingly was not very many. That's why I think it's possible that my data set was slightly incomplete. So from there, I chose to include them in my analysis. And I started with highest level competitions. I started with the national competition, and then regional competitions, and then conference competitions in the more competitive conferences. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Sam.
Do you have any hindsight into the difference in characteristics between the German and American environment, or how that would affect your results?
So I did a little bit of research as to like, because obviously I found that study actually really late in my research, and it was very much like a shock. Like I was like, wow, like this is kind of what I want to do, but I didn't read a ton into like systems of like collegiate or that age competition in Germany, but I do know that just from my own experience as like a person, like the system of competition in American colleges is like very competitive and very like sports forward, especially Division I. People come to the US to compete, obviously, in collegiate sports. So I kind of just get the feeling from that, and one that's like, that it's very much like more competitive. And also I kind of didn't touch upon this that much, but the German population, it was a much like wider age range, and I was kind of like hesitant to like really be able to draw conclusions from wider age range, because I just worry about like generalization. Like if there is a specific trend here, it's probably broadly generalized. Okay. If a bigger age range is included. But I don't have like, I didn't do a ton of research on like specifics between German and American collegiate competition, if that makes sense. Yeah.
What prompted you to choose this question?
So I didn't want to do a Google form, which maybe was a mistake because this was a lot of work. But basically, a couple of years ago, I was talking to some of my cross-country ski coaches who were collegiate athletes in skiing and also running, actually. And they basically just described how when they were in their 20s, they experienced like a dip or like a plateau in performance that was like really unexpected. Like they felt their body change, they felt their performance change, and eventually it stabled out. But I was like, oh my God, like I've never heard that before. And upon talking to other women who were, experienced the same thing, I was like, oh my God, like this is a thing. So I was like, I want to do my research with regards to that. And they also pointed me in the direction of this woman, Lauren Fleshman, who was a really competitive American distance runner. Her memoir, Good for a Girl, which also describes her experience with the same thing, with extremely variable performance in college, including decline, especially when compared to her male counterparts. So I was like, okay, I want to do some sort of research there. And then I get on my research databases, and there's like nothing. There's nothing on trends in performance, there's nothing on trends in physiology, but I know so many women, and I know of so many women who have experienced this. So I was like, okay, can I even do this? Fortunately, my AP research teacher kind of directed me in the like pulled me back, like I just have to start like filling in the edge of the huge gap, if you will. So so that's why I have this, like, it's like not really drawing any, it's like not going into it with any expectations. Like, I'm not expecting to find decline or not expecting to find variable performance because I don't have any, like, other than like anecdotal evidence really for that. So I just kind of am I was just trying to get a broader picture, ideally for future research, which could delve more specifically into